Hi, this is Kathy Sparrow, literary midwife, and I have the honor of having another conversation with Krista Helman, who is a therapist, social worker, and founder of the Trauma and Grief Institute in Ottawa. Toronto.
Ottawa.
Ottawa. I always forget where you are. And she has written a book, Over the Rainbow: The Love, Loss, and Legacy of Your Dog. And it is a powerful book about healing with your grief over losing your beloved pet. But I'm going to let Krista say more to that. And I just want to tell you, it was really a heartwarming read. And I had the honor of reading it several times and seeing it birthed into this world. Welcome, Krista.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be able to share this with everybody, and I'm really glad to talk about it today with you, Kathy.
So, why did you write this book?
So I really wanted to create a space where people could feel validated and supported in their grief, especially around the loss of a pet. This is often sometimes, seen as disenfranchised grief, where the loss isn't seen as valuable or as big as perhaps losing a human loved one. And so I really wanted to create a space where people could be validated with their loss and perhaps give them a bit of a guide as to how they could go about with their healing with it.
And so I know you had a very personal experience with this. Can you share about that?
Yeah, so before I wrote this book, I was just a trauma therapist. And in our trainings, we don't actually get a lot of training on grief. It's a specialized training that you need to take. And I noticed a wave of clients coming through my office that were suddenly, they were dealing with grief and loss. And in particular, they were dealing with loss of a dog. And I'm usually good at being able to contain my own personal stuff. As therapists, we separate our stuff. That at the end of these sessions, I was having a really hard time containing some old grief I thought I had dealt with, but I had a very special dog in my life, and her name was Aura, and she's on the front of that cover. And yeah, and so after a client would come in, I would help them and I would be professional. And after they would leave, I noticed this wave of grief overcoming. And so I thought, okay, I have some choices here. I can ask these clients to, refer them out, or I can do some training on grief and learn how to help them. And maybe I need to do some of my own therapy. So I asked them, I said, I'm not sure if I can help you in this area. And pretty much anyone I asked, they said no, they wanted to stay with me. So my options were to get more training and do my own therapy, and that's what I did. And as a result came this book. The more I learned, the more I realized, okay, I'm not being silly about my grief and loss. For some reason, I was able to empathize with my clients coming through the door about their loss, but I was dismissing my own loss. So I've learned so much about where does grief come from, why does it hurt so much, and how can we heal through this process, and actually how can we grow through this process as well. And some of the answers were not what I expected. So I thought, okay, this is worth sharing.
I have two questions, but that last comment makes me want to ask, what surprised you the most?
So I think one of the things that surprised me the most was when I shared with people that I was writing a book on grief and loss of a dog. Almost immediately, every single time, there was this, "Aw," and then let me tell you about my dog, right? So immediately I started to notice and realize that, okay, this isn't just my experience or the few clients that are coming through my door. This is something that almost anyone who's ever had a dog in their life has experienced or is anticipating to experience. So that was a bit of a shock to me, because for some reason I thought my heaviness, my loss was just mine. So it was really wonderful for me to realize I wasn't alone. And the other really interesting thing that came up was just learning about how grief is actually a pain with purpose, and how we experience pain as a way of our brain to be motivated to remap this new relationship, because how we're used to interacting with our loved one when they're alive isn't possible anymore. And so the pain is actually our brain starting that rewiring process. And so the pain is required to start this process, but the pain isn't required forever. And so I thought that was really a wonderful way to look at it. I mean, not that we wish pain on anybody, but if we can see that pain as pain with a purpose, we can then embrace it. And then when we can embrace it, we can feel it. And when we can feel it, we can get through it even faster and with even more wonderful benefits to it. The other thing that came up that was really interesting is something called after-death communication.
Mhm.
And so this is where people have, a loved one has passed, and I didn't realize how much science was behind it actually, where a loved one has passed and those who are alive experience some sort of communication. So whether that be a sound of their voice or feeling just their presence in the room, or a very, very, very vivid dream that feels different than a typical dream. And this has been documented basically across our human lifespan that we've been having these experiences. So at this point in time, we can't prove that people are actually having these experiences and that they're as if they're actual communications with the deceased. But what research does show is that when we do have these experiences, it's almost always comforting because we feel that reconnection. And sometimes within these experiences, we perceive our loved one as giving us some sort of a message.
Mhm.
And almost always that message is, I'm fine, live your life, move on, you're forgiven, right? All these things that we need to hear. And so again, as a therapist, it's what I've taken from that is it's not my job to tell you that yes, you can speak with the deceased. It's if you have this experience, let's talk about it. Let's make some meaning from it, because the science and the research shows that this is very healing and helpful for us as we go through our grieving journey.
So now I have two other questions. Um, why do you think you dismissed your grief over Aura?
Oh, well, I think part of it was the reaction I got from others. We had other dogs in the home. We've had foster dogs. I said goodbye to foster dogs all the time, and I was fine with it. Sometimes there's this mentality of, well, you have other dogs, or you can just get another dog. And I was busy, and I don't think I also didn't realize how important she was in my life until she was gone. Like sometimes you take these things for granted, and for Aura in particular, she followed me around in every room, no matter what room it was. She was always in the corner somewhere. And just to feel that absence, just it just broke my heart. Like even though I had other dogs greeting me at the door, it was, when I would move from the kitchen to the living room and I felt her absence in the room. And then as I started to reflect more, realizing how important she was with getting me through some really difficult times. Um, at one point in time, I was a single mom of 3 kids going to university as a mature student. And I truly loved everyone and everything in this world except myself, really. And Aura came into our life, and she really reminded me that I was perfect just the way I was, and I was lovable just the way I was. And yes, of course, my children reminded me that I was lovable, but it wasn't the same. The connection and my sense of purpose with Aura was just different than any human connection I had had. Um, and so she truly was special. And I think that, sometimes we can have, I mean, I think all dogs are wonderful, but we can sometimes have a really special relationship with a pet. And that's who Aura was.
You referred to her as your heart dog, right?
I do, yes. Yeah, she was definitely my heart dog. And I would like for people listening to know that it doesn't have to be a dog either. I mean, I'm a little bit biased because I am a dog lover. But it can be any animal. It could be a cat, it could be a bird. When I was a younger social worker, and I talk about this in the book a little bit, I worked at a community center, and sometimes we would have times when people would come in who were living with homelessness, and we would offer them a coffee to get warm from the cold. And there was this one gentleman who had a rat living in his hoodie, and he told me that he had nursed this rat. I guess it wasn't feeling well. He found it and brought it to health, and then they had this symbiotic relationship where it kept him company, and he kept it fed. And he told me that this rat was the only soul he trusted, and that it was likely the reason why he was alive. So it doesn't just have to be a dog. A connection, a bond is a bond, right?
Yeah. So, you talked about after death communication. Have you had that with Aura?
I have had some experiences with Aura. And, you know, I shouldn't need to be careful with who I share that with, but in the past, I have been careful with who I share that with. There's a lot of stigma attached to it. So with Aura, you know, one of the experiences I had was I was on an airplane and she just suddenly popped in my head, and it's hard to explain because I'm on an airplane, but I felt like she was next to me on the airplane. And I really, it's so hard to describe, but I truly felt her presence. And I had, after she had died, I had this little stone. It was an opal and it was in the shape of a paw, and I had misplaced it. And the next day after we had landed, I was on vacation with kids, and there was a little trinket in one of the stores, and it had a paw print on it that reminded me of the stone I had lost. And I thought, okay, this is weird. I just had like this weird, almost like not deja vu, but similar to like a deja vu feeling where I was like, okay, this is some sort of a connection.
Right, right. Oh, neat.
I also had some really strong, vivid dreams about her as well. But I've heard, as I've asked people, I've heard many people talk about their experiences. So my dad, you know, when his dog passed away, both my mom and my dad, the night that after she died, thought that they heard her. She had like a huff, like a woof, that she would say that she wanted to go outside. They both thought that they heard that. And of course, she wasn't there. And then later that night, he thought that he heard her walking around with her nails clicking at night. And it's interesting because that particular comment, when I've done talks about this, a lot of people nod their head.
Yeah.
And I think that yeah, hearing their dog walk around at night, at least the first week or so, is really common. And so, and when I asked my dad, for example, like, was that scary for you? Because I know his belief system is likely not that, you know, she was visiting, and he said, no, it was really nice. You know, I want for people to not feel afraid. I want for people to embrace this, and, you know, and I wish we could normalize these experiences a little bit more, because clearly we've been having them for a very long time. And just because science can't prove exactly what's happening doesn't mean that it isn't happening or that it isn't valuable.
Right. We just don't have the tools to do it yet, right? But yeah, that's probably coming. You have also written a companion book, a workbook for Over the Rainbow to help people through their grief.
I have, yeah. So I have it here. This is for grief and loss in general. So throughout Over the Rainbow, there's QR codes linking to like either PDF or a professionally recorded guided meditation. And then this book, Self-Care Moments, has even more of that in here. It has, you know, some worksheets to fill out. It has, you know, a few more guided meditations. And so that is geared for anyone dealing with grief and loss in general.
Yeah, because you can't really segment it, can you? Oh, this is grief about a dog. This is grief about a job loss. This is grief about losing a partner or a loved one. Yeah, wow. Ooh, it just got chills on that one.
I would say Over the Rainbow is like unique in the sense that it has my story. You know, it is a self-help book, and it has my story throughout with a purpose. And it also has the stories of other people with their loss throughout the book, and that's also with a purpose as well, so the reader really is feeling engaged, but also so that they're feeling seen and heard in their own loss. So even though everyone's loss is unique, if we can see ourselves and a little bit of our story in someone else's story, then we don't feel like we're so alone in the process.
Exactly. And I've often said that, in fact, my master's thesis was about how literature and writing our story not only heals ourselves, but it heals our readers as well, helps them have some growth over whatever they can identify with in our books. So, yeah.
Well, there was definitely some healing on my end as I wrote this book.
Yes, I know. Mine too, because it reminded me of the loss of particularly one of my dogs. And sit here sobbing while I read your book and edit your pages and was like, oh, I gotta go do Krista's again. There was this love-hate relationship, not really, but there was like, okay, I've got to do this. So I'd make sure my space was clean and I wasn't going to be interrupted. And there were many times my partner walked in and got, reading that book again, are you?
It's probably not a book you want to take with you on vacation.
No, it's not one of those. No, but it is, it's so vitally important that, I don't want to scare readers away and listeners away, but, if, gosh, so many times, so many people, so many thought leaders have said, if you don't face it, it's always going to linger in the background and cloud everything we do. So, I think, my term is if you got to name the dragon to slay the dragon. So if we go say, oh, I have grief over the loss of, Lily that I need to, my dog, that I need to address, then it clears the way for so much more goodness to come in, actually, some really light and beautiful emotions. Not that sadness and grief are bad, but they're not always wanted.
Well, that actually, that's a good segue to, the subtitle, The Love, Loss, and Legacy of Your Dog, right? That the love speaks to clearly the love and connection and the true attachment bond we can have with our dog. The loss speaks to the fact that we want to validate that this is a real valid loss for people. I mean, there's many people who, their connection with their dog is stronger than a connection with any human being, especially if you've had childhood trauma. A dog can, that bond is so important. And then legacy speaks to, part of the grieving process is about making meaning, but that doesn't mean making meaning as to why they died. It means, what did they mean for you? What did they add to your life? What gifts and life lessons have they given you forever? The very beginning of my book, I talk about how, the very opening scene, I talk about how every spring, Aura would go outside and lay down on the patio. And so that's how we knew that spring had finally arrived, was we'd look outside and we'd see her out on this cold patio stone. And so for me, right, like I've done a lot of reflection. And when I think about what did she teach me about life? And she taught me to really love the simple things. And I feel like I can do that now after doing some reflection and some work. Enjoy the sunshine. Get snuggled up in a blanket from time to time. Get outside and go for a walk. But if I reflect even deeper about me, what did she offer? Even though I'm perfectly imperfect, right? I need to remind myself that on a regular basis, that it's okay to be perfectly imperfect. And I am lovable. And even though I'm not perfect, I can work on myself, and that doesn't make an excuse for me to just, be rude to people. I can still love who I am at the same time, because she didn't care that I fed the kids chicken nuggets again because I was tired. She didn't care that I didn't do the laundry. She didn't care that, I was sitting there crying, and that I looked like a mess, and she just seemed to know the right time to give me one of those pug snorts. Any of you have a pug, you know what I'm talking about. And, yeah, so I mean, what is the legacy that is left behind from your dog, or that they will leave with you? Because if your dog is still alive, this book is helpful as well, because we can start to really sit with and appreciate everything that they're offering us right here, right now. And if we know that our dog is going to pass before us, which for most of us that is likely, we can tell them now how we feel, just like a human, and we can show them how we feel now. And that way there's no second guessing that they knew how we felt about them.
Yeah. Oof. So you covered a lot. What's one piece of advice you can give to anyone suffering? Let's stay with the book right now, but having experienced the loss of an animal, particularly your dog.
I would say you have to feel it to heal it. I think that's Dan Siegel's saying. So you really need to let yourself feel it. But there's this balance, because sometimes like you still have to go on taking the kids to soccer practice and making dinner and going to work. So there's a time to contain your grief, and you just have to make sure that you also make time to feel it. And feeling it means feeling all those feelings, knowing that it's a wave of sadness, and when you can feel it, it can transform. If you don't feel it, it gets stuck. That's probably the most important thing.
Yeah. So it sounds like it, it could even be a planned time of, hey, the kids are gone, I'll have the house to myself, husband's out or partner's out playing golf or whatever. I'm gonna spend some time with this book and really do. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be done all at once, right? No, you have a lot of. I've seen the workbook too, and it's really in depth. And what I also noticed, it's like peeling back a layer, one little layer at a time.
So when we first lose someone we love, a lot of us go through a little bit of a feeling, this numb feeling. And it's not that we don't want to feel the feelings, it's that our body might say, this is too overwhelming right now. And I think our body's really smart that way, that we might need a little bit of time, a couple of days, maybe even hours, depending on the situation, before we can feel the full extent. Most of us actually don't feel the full extent of our loss until like 6 months. So dealing with grief and loss is not like a weekend thing. It really is, you're right, like peeling back the layers and feeling a little bit, dipping your toe in the water, then coming back out, then maybe putting your whole foot in the water, then coming back out. If you just jump into that cold lake all at once, it's going to be really uncomfortable and probably not very helpful.
Sounds like a little self-compassion is necessary in this process.
Oh, totally. And that self-compassion piece, probably would involve sleeping well, eating well, surrounding yourself with people who validate your feelings. That's actually another piece of the puzzle to going through grief and loss healing.
Yeah, being surrounded by people who can understand you, right? So where can people find you and your book?
So people can, my book is available on Amazon, and it's also available in paperback and audiobook. And so audiobook, I believe, it's on Audible. Yes, it's on Audible, and then Amazon is the paperback. And then the workbook is only available on Amazon because it's not an audiobook.
Right.
And if people want to get a hold of me, they can find out more about me or purchase the book through my website, KristaHelman.com. Or they can find me on our trauma and grief website called traumaandgrief.com. And there's more information there. We are a bunch of therapists that offer psychotherapy, and it's specializing in trauma and grief. So if someone did need some extra support and you're in Canada, we can help you with that as well.
Great. Well, Krista, thank you. It's been a pleasure seeing you again. It's been a bit of time since the book came out, and you were off forming the Trauma and Grief Institute and doing other things. So again, thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Take care.